All right. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We just wanted to give a brief update to the Silo Hill Stormwater Basin project.
Where'd you
And
go? I can't hear you.
can you hear me, Mayor?
Yeah, yes, I can.
Okay, sorry about that. We're going to give a brief update on the Silo Hill Basin project, and we appreciate all the public for attending. If you know of anyone that could not attend, we will have this on YouTube tomorrow. So I'm going to hand it right over. Dave, do you want to start us off?
Sure, yeah.
Who's here?
I'm Dave Pillmeyer, and I have been involved in a project management capacity for the work here. And I believe since our last meeting, we've gotten a good bit more farther along with the design for the planned Silo Hill retrofit project. And since our initial meeting, we've had some geotechnical testing completed out at the site, and we quickly learned that our initial concept plan really wasn't going to work because the natural conditions weren't going to support that kind of a design. So it kind of set us back. I don't want to say to the drawing board, but it made us rethink a few things in our approach a little bit. So and that's really what we want to update everybody on here today. Just bring you up current on where we are with the design. It's not completed, but it's pretty far along. And I guess with that, I'll turn things over to our technical design lead on the project. He probably will be able to walk you through some of the details a little better than I, and that's Theron Bisco. Theron?
So I'm part of the B&L Bearing Construction and Nativescapes team working on this project. So we, as David said, we're pretty far along. We have a working concept that it's essentially near complete. We just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page before we finalize construction drawings and start to proceed towards the permitting route that we have to have for prior to construction. So the as Dave mentioned, originally the design was supposed to be a combination sort of bioretention rain garden with some other filtration features. The geotechnical testing that was conducted at the site revealed that infiltration really was not possible with natural conditions that are there. So we went back and looked at options at that point in time, and within the confines of the existing basin footprint without major overhaul of the existing conditions, we have to proceed towards like a micropool bioretention / wetland feature, which is one of the options that Maryland will allow. So I think Kevin Reese is also with us. He's landscape architect with Nativescapes. So Kevin developed some graphics to share at the meeting here tonight and to help explain what the approach is, and also show a little more detail as to how it will be planted, what the final conditions going to look like, so what the community would be seeing out there. I don't know, Zach, if that's something you need me to share, or if you have those available that you could share them. I think you're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, the only thing that I have is the site plan.
Okay. If I'm able to share, if it's set up that way, I can bring those up. Oh.
Yeah, it should be able to let you.
Okay. So I'll share these and speak a little bit to the design, and then I'll turn it over to Kevin to share some information on what the visual approach is with the landscaping. So let me know if you don't see this come out.
Perfect.
Looks good.
So the approach here that we're taking is really a combination of a couple different allowable stormwater management features. So we have an upland area towards the middle of the pond that will allow us to accumulate some water, and a forebay at the main pipe inflow that comes into pond to collect sediment, and then a small pool feature near the existing outlet structure of the pond, which really is acting to help filter out some of the sediments. As it might have been discussed in the last meeting, the primary goal of the town for this project is to meet some water quality improvement credit requirements. So in order to do that, we have to be able to demonstrate that we are able to filter and store sediments that are coming out of the stormwater from the community before they would be discharged to Flat Run, which is to the west. So the graphic that Kevin so helpfully prepared for this kind of helps demonstrate that, you know, this is what the existing pond looks like, basin looks like, and how we're going to direct the inflows through these features towards the micropool to the exit. You know, one of the main challenges with the project that we had to overcome was not expanding the footprint of the existing basin beyond what it is right now. So as a result, we are required to, you know, excavate and take the pond in general will be slightly deeper than the existing condition. Primarily in areas where the forebay and micropool are located. The other upland, or what we're calling upland areas within the middle of the basin that you see here shown with tree plantings and vegetation are really only going to be slightly lower than the existing pond bottom.
And I just have one question, I know the first thing a lot of people think of when you see pools and wet areas is mosquitoes. So I know Kevin was going to be putting in some plants to, you know, eat the mosquitoes or kill the mosquitoes. Is that still the case?
I believe that's the case with the planting plan. That hasn't changed from our original approach. So we do share on the next image what we're proposing to do for vegetation, and that will ultimately be on the plans. So we'll bring that next one up for Kevin. So this is the second half of Kevin's posters that it shows a cross section of the proposed basin schematically, and then what would be in these different areas. I'm not sure, Kevin, if you're able to give a little more input.
Yeah, can you hear me? I know I'm cutting out in and out a little bit here.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So on the right side, you'll see the slope area, which would be by the street side. Primarily grasses and other shrubs, perhaps some trees here and there. Also, there's the maintenance area around the perimeter area, which is basically the only mowed section, which allows access to the forebay for any digging out of plants, which I'll get to in a second, and access to the riprap area. So the forebay would be the area of sediment collection, and we kind of expect that area to get overrun by cattail once in a while, and we have to excavate it occasionally for maintenance purposes. So planting primarily will be focused in the aquatic shelf and channel and micropool areas, where we are going to have a very large diversity of native plant species, which will all attract various butterflies, insects, birds, etc., and create a resource value and aesthetically pleasing area to look at, and yeah, bring some habitat into the Silo Hill Basin area.
So speaking to the mosquito aspect of it, typically what we try to do to avoid producing conditions where mosquitoes would breed is to have deep water areas. Typically mosquitoes are breeding in shallow pools of stagnant water. So one of the requirements for this is to have pilot channels from the forebay to the micropool and from all the inflows, so that water is not pooling anywhere despite apart from where it's supposed to. So the micropool and forebay may accumulate some water, but they're going to be deeper pools of water where mosquitoes don't breed. And they're also going to provide habitat for the types of species that prey on mosquitoes.
Perfect, thank you.
So one of the major features of the basin that we were trying not to disturb with the design, and was pretty critical, was on the west side, you have what Maryland regulates as a dam embankment. So the existing pond has that structure. So we were very careful with the proposed design not to create a condition that we would disturb that or place any new loads on that or have a situation where we're trying to put new pipes through that. So the idea with the design is to reuse the existing outlet pipe and just reproduce the structure. So we would remove the existing structure, reconstruct it with the new design elevations for the outlet, for the overflow. And it would be very, very minimal increases to the dam embankment just to bring it back to the original design elevation. So a little bit of fill, but nothing beyond what was originally constructed at the site. The same goes for the spillway. We would make sure that any incidental damage or existing erosion around the spillway crest is repaired and restored to a design elevation, but that's really minor fill on that left embankment. So the work is really limited to the basin bottom itself. So that will kind of help create a condition where construction is a little bit less invasive. So you're not going to necessarily have a lot of work occurring around the extent. It's really going to be minor work. And then most of the work will actually be occurring down in the basin itself. We do also have the status of our design drawings here. I can share those as well. Let me.
Darren, one thing I was going to also bring up, the forebay itself, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's really intended to be in place to take on some of the, regular run-of-the-mill rain events to, handle those kinds of flows. Whereas the micropole itself might be there to manage the larger storm events. Is that right?
That's correct. So forebays are required for any pipe coming into the basin that captures a certain percentage of the flow. So in this case, only the pipe coming from the southeast corner into the basin is actually required to be collected at a forebay. And the forebays has a minimum size requirement, which is based on a small amount of rainfall coming off of just impervious surfaces like driveways and roofs. So it's fairly minimal in size. Its primary function is to accumulate sediment before it can go anywhere else. And it's intended to be the main location where maintenance would occur. So usually what's required, Maryland requires really, you put some sort of monitoring staff gauge type monument in the forebay to help show when clean out should occur. So it's really to track the accumulation of sediment. Micropool ideally would receive very little sediment. The filtration is primarily occurring in the forebay, but for the other two smaller pipes discharging into the pond basin, there would be some sediment that would accumulate with those. A lot of that would drop out in the pilot channels near where the inflows come in. So there would be maintenance along those as well. But we don't expect those to be major contributors just based on the proportion of the total neighborhood coming to those locations. I will go ahead. Gives you a little more schematic idea of the design drawings. So right now, I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit. This is the layout we're pursuing, and you can see the three different pipes entering the pond from the north, northeast, and southeast. Only the one from the southeast is required to really have a forebay to accumulate sediment. In larger rain events, those types of events that, flash rainfalls where you have several inches of just rainfall over a short period of time, or prolonged rainfall events where you have that same volume occurring over a day or two. the water elevation is going to come up in the basin as part of the design. So essentially it will turn into more of a pond on a temporary basis as a result of those types of rainfall events. And then it will discharge over the period of a day back to Flat Run, which is to the west. So the idea being that it will return, provided there's not continued rainfall, to the original design elevation of the micropool within that short period of time. This kind of helps demonstrate some of the limits of the work. Most of the work's occurring, excuse me, in the bottom of the basin. And we have some proposed grading and fill on top of the embankment that will require the fence to be temporarily removed and reset, and a small amount of fill on the spillway crest, which, really what that would be raising that elevation with additional stone material. But in general, it's a pretty straightforward design approach. The constraints to the site were the major factor and how we came up with this design approach.
Great. I was just wondering if there's any questions from the public while we have everybody here. I know there's a bunch of people from the HOA. Jen, do you have anything?
Yeah, actually, I have about 3 questions, I believe. First, what portion of the fence will be removed? Will that be closer to the road, or would that be behind houses? I know we have a couple houses with smaller children, so we just want to make sure, we're thinking about safety concerns for them in their backyard. So I just wanted to, if we knew which section of fence would be removed, or if all of it's being removed, so we know that up front.
So the sections that are being impacted by actual placement of soil are along the west side, so the dam embankment.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
There is a chance that we would remove a small section on the east side to provide temporary access, but typically we would install safety fence around the extent of the site to help provide some protection from children and animals entering the site.
Great. Okay. So we did see some, bushes or shrubs or trees in the sloped area. Currently, the HOA is, paying to have that area mowed. Will that still require that level of maintenance, or will the plantings there not require mowing after the project is completed? It's kind of hard to tell, so we just wanted to make sure we understood that.
You go
I can
ahead,
take
Kevin.
this. So it's expected that the area will only need to be mowed once, maybe twice a year. That would be like early spring, really late winter. The maintenance area around the perimeter may need mowing more than that, just to keep it down so there's access. But that's really just around the perimeter, just inside the fence. That's the plan. And then the slopes, that's all like tall grasses and perennials, as is the bottom of the area. So
great. Okay. And then the third question is, currently, at least in my view, we have kind of a serious trash problem. Whenever we have runoff, we have lots of trash going into this area. How is that? Is this going to be something that, HOA members can, with the proper access, go in and maybe clean up some of that trash over, a certain amount of time? Or how does that come about? Because obviously it's still going to be a problem. Anything that washes down through that area whenever it rains, there's still going to be a good amount of trash that goes into the space. And we'd really like to try to keep it as clean as possible and not look kind of the way it does right now.
So there's generally a couple options. I know there is maintenance access to the basin now through a gate.
Correct.
That would still remain. Really on the trash end, we can only deal with what comes there. So if the inlets in the streets don't have any means of filtering out trash, it is going to make it there. Occasionally we will prescribe using like trash racks at the inflow points, but that tends to create an issue where you're going to back up water into the pipes if it's not maintained on a regular basis. So I think in this case, it may be best to let it, the pipe on the southeast end, the forebay would be there, so a lot of trash would collect in the forebay. So that would have a berm around it, so it'd be accessible from the east side. And then the other two pipes are in the same, on the north side, but also on the east side of the basin, really closer to the toe of the slope, but the pilot channels are where that material is going to accumulate.
Okay.
Those are pretty flat, so unless you have a big storm event, they shouldn't really discharge it to the micropool, but that's something that we might take into consideration if we can.
Because
create
right
conditions where
now,
it's accessible.
yeah, right now we really can't access anything in the center just because of all the cattail and everything of that nature. And we don't know, truthfully, I have no idea how wet it is in there or what's living in there and those kinds of things. So it was more kind of a question of, is this going to be something that we could walk into and clean those things up rather than, it growing up and not really being able to access any of the areas to clean up the trash.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
we can look at the planting plan and the design of everything and see where we can maybe have trash collect itself
Mm-hmm.
and then have an access point for that. My worry is that if we're allowing access into the basin area, it might pose like some other hazard or concern if kids got in there or something else like that.
Which we don't want.
So that would be a question. But we can look at something that we could design into the whole thing, or the other option is I've seen like nets put on the outflows of pipes where, but that would involve high maintenance from participants in the area, the community.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we don't allow access to anybody. It's all locked up and things of that nature. So it would really only be either myself or some other people within the HOA that could access that and do a cleanup, once or twice or however often it needs to happen. Just more of a just cleaning up the trash kind of situation rather than, anybody just going in there and doing whatever. We just want to make sure that we can maintain it a little bit nicer than what it is right now.
And one thing, Jen, they are going to be giving us a maintenance manual, which
Mm-hmm.
we can definitely give you a copy.
Okay.
So we'll be able to keep it up, and maintain the pretty flowers and, butterflies and everything else. So that's something
Absolutely.
we'll give you a copy of.
Great. That would
at
be
the end.
wonderful.
Yep.
So that's all of my questions that I can think of just right here. I'm sure there might be others.
Hi, I actually have a question. Jen, by the way, thank you. Those were great questions and represented what some of our little group of neighbors here had. We were a little bit curious when we initially started this process. We thought that this would kind of allow the town to take over some of the maintenance of this area. And so some of the questions led us to wonder about the maintenance. So are you, Zach, you're probably best to answer this. We'll still, as a HOA, be responsible for the mowing and the cutting of this area, and then also the cleanup. If there is trash, that is something that will still be left to the Flat Run HOA?
That is correct. Yes. So we're paying for the retrofit. And I believe we have to maintain the bottom for so many years, but I need to get back with you on that. Because there's so much requirements for the grant that we get and also for our permit. So I'll get back to Jen on that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it's my understanding the maintenance meant the maintenance of the basin in terms of the HOA was not going to have to fix the basin because it was failing. It's just the town is going to maintain the basin structure and make sure that it works properly, but that it's still our basin in terms of an HOA. So we still need to mow it. And I mean, obviously we don't have to clean up the trash, but it's something that would benefit, everyone. So
that's correct. Yep.
So yeah, so that was my understanding, was that it was the maintenance of the actual structure versus the grass and things like that.
Yeah. So if this would fail, for example, within 5 years or something, we're not going to leave you stranded, because we were the ones that did the construction of it. We were the ones that, this is our number one project. This is our first project. So you'll still be responsible for mowing and everything else, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that clarification. And one more question, living in Grantland in my work field, when are final reports, like when are they when do we recognize that this project has worked and we kind of are let go from, as you said, the HOA will be kind of taking over and making sure that everything after a number of years is functioning? I'm just curious when we kind of step off being back to fully controlling and ensuring that everything is efficient as was written in the grant.
Yeah, I'll let David and Theron talk about the construction timetable. But like I said, I'll have to get back with you on the maintenance requirements. I'm not sure if, Dave, do you know that by any chance for the MS4 permit? I know it's kind of putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I'd probably have to look that up and get back to you all. But what I can tell you is, I mean, the work that we're doing right now is, you know, the design phase of the work. So, you know, it really wouldn't speak much to the later stages, the post-construction and the or even the construction process. So I believe you know, anything related to the grants for those phases of the work are still things that need to be worked through. But yeah, let me check and I could get back to you on that.
But Leslie, one thing I can answer is this project must be concluded in 2023 in order to meet our MS4 requirements through the state. So the construction will 100% be done by 2023. I know that the contractor wants to get it done way before, which we do too. So we'll have to get back with you on the timetable.
Right, and if it does help, the design being far along as it can be, ideally completed, is actually one of the components that we would include in the grant application process for the construction phase of the work. So, you know, and I believe that some of the grants that we're pursuing for the construction phase, those grant periods are going to open, I believe, around August. So it should be pretty soon. And those would run through approximately the end of the year. So perhaps Jay on the call here might also have comment on this, but I imagine that, you know, construction may get underway. Best guess right now, maybe spring next year.
Okay, thanks. A little bit more of my question was leaning towards, so once this project's done and say in 5 years, the basin stops working as expected, is our HOA once again, or is there a time limit that the grant is guaranteed to have kind of fixed this issue and upholds or maintains? Is there any?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, the town's responsible for failing basins per our MS4 permit. Now, you know, we wouldn't let the HOA get rid of itself and stop, you know, maintaining it, because that's usually how towns take over maintenance of basins if the HOA somehow goes bankrupt or, you know. So I'm not sure if that's answering your questions, but.
So I think initially there was a discussion that the town would oversee the structure maintenance of the basin for, let's just say 30 years, I think is what we initially discussed. In terms of, as long as that basin works fine or has any issues for that 30 years, the town's going to oversee that basin. And then at the end of 30 years, there would be a discussion of, does the basin again need to be reconstructed, or, you know, is it doing fine? I don't know the general lifespan of these types of basins, but obviously this one's not 30 years old. So,
right,
you know, at this point, I would think at about 30 years, it's going to look at the possibility of again needing to be reconstructed, if not a little earlier than that. And then at that point, then that gets redone with the HOA again, with most likely a whole different group of HOA people.
Right, and just so everyone's aware, this is a $224,000 project. So, you know, we're putting a lot of money into this to make sure it is a very stable and, you know, good product that you guys are going to see every single day. We don't want to put something, we didn't go the cheap route because we want to make sure it's, you know, it's the best that you guys can have in your neighborhood. But again, I'd have to get back to you on the whole maintenance thing. You guys will stop the mow, but, you know, we might clean up the trash for so many years and clean out the sediment. Just whatever our permit requires, we will do. And I'll get back to Jen on that so she can forward it to everybody.
Yeah, and I'll let everybody know as soon as you give me that information.
Sure.
Thanks, Jen. And that was more along what I was kind of looking for that 30-year mark, because you're right, that basin's about 15 years old. So when it was
Yeah.
established, I assume it was meant to last longer than it has. So we want to ensure that
Yeah.
those of us retiring here aren't in another 15 years going through this process again. So thank you for clarifying.
Exactly.
I will say with regards to the maintenance, to give you an idea, so that, like you said, the basin's roughly 15 years old, and we do see signs, excuse me, the lights like to turn out. We do see signs that sediment has accumulated over time, and the bottom elevation is definitely higher than the original design. So that's part of the maintenance that the town would likely be taking on as part of their permit. Making sure that the forebay is cleaned out, making sure that the micropole elevations doesn't accumulate too much sediment. The outfall structure still is passing the design flows, and that the dam embankment to the west side is stable and not eroding. So those are like the structural features that are tied to the stormwater criteria that the design has to meet. But those are pretty much the critical maintenance items that are a heavier lift.
I mean, in my eyes, maintenance in terms of what we're talking about, I don't think you would want just a regular HOA member that lives there to deal with those kinds of things in terms of a town, concept, and making sure that the sediment pond continues to properly function. Because obviously we don't know what we're doing, to make sure that that does what it needs to do. I mean, mowing the grass and picking up trash here and there and things like that is one thing, but maintaining a structure like this properly is generally something that you don't want to leave to just, regular Joe Schmoes from the neighborhood. So.
Yeah, the main reason for this is for water quality, not quantity. Right now, it's basically a quantity pond. So it just goes in and slowly soaks into the ground. And it doesn't really do a good job of cleaning the water. So, you got pollutants going into Flat Run over there, which ultimately goes to the Chesapeake Bay. So we want to make sure that it's properly functioning, so the pollution is no longer going into the stream, because that's the number one goal of the permit: clean up the water. But so I don't want to get people to think that this is not functioning. It is a functioning pond. So there's nothing breaking down on it. That's just we're doing this project as a quality treatment.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, you kind of touched on it a little bit already, Zach. The permitting process itself also helps to protect against the threat of these basins like this from failing, and that's all through a carefully thought out and approved maintenance plan and schedule. So that's going to be there and in place to help safeguard against that happening.
Great. And I think the concept of quote unquote failure was something that we have just been told through the last few years, that the basin was quote unquote failing because of the trees that were growing in it and things of that nature. So I'm sure it's still doing what it's supposed to do. It's just not doing it as effectively as it should.
Exactly. Yep.
So one thing, if I could, is along the lines of maintenance, which is a huge thing I always failing or succeeding. In this design, I think one of the main maintenance things that we're going to have to look at is the cattail just coming back in and reintroducing itself, keeping control of that, and other exotic invasive plants that might choke out the channels, might cause sedimentation, and maybe teaching the HOA community about those plants and what they can do about them, how they might be able to maintain this basin as a community garden, in a sense, teachable space. I'm not sure what the rules and regulations are about all that, but teaching people about maintenance is one thing I definitely like to speak about with my clients. So that it's one of the main success or failures of a project is maintenance.
And that's definitely something that we can clarify, Zach, as we move forward, and who's going to do what and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions? Good, Chris. Good question so far. and important questions. I understand maintenance is the #1 thing. Basically, that's probably what your HOA is responsible for, just mowing this basin, correct? And a little bit of snow removal.
So I do have a question from someone. Will they be grading any of the slopes from the backyards? There will be no work outside of the fence. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we're not proposing any grading outside the fence except on the embankment of the dam where we're proposing to remove and reset the fence. So that would be on the west
Okay.
side, not on the backyards.
Okay, and will they be taking any dirt, I'm assuming, out of, so the question is really, some of the people actually don't like the slope in their backyard. So I think they're asking, is there a way to actually use some of that dirt and put it into the backyards and they can use that? Probably not, I would assume, but if that is a possibility, instead of hauling it away. I don't know how that affects the drainage at that point and runoff, and because I know slopes are very specific on how the water runs off of the yards and into this area. But if there is a possibility of fixing some of the slopes, or giving the dirt to the those people that are requesting it, and they deal with it in their backyards, that's a question that's being asked.
I'll be honest, I don't know if you want to use that dirt. It's,
Probably
lots of
nasty.
lot of pollutants in it, and sediment and rocks, and probably probably not the best idea.
Just because it's just gross dirt.
It's just pretty, it's disgusting.
And
generally,
so,
it's anything that's on your roadway is going to end up in this location. So, there, I will say, with respect to that, and from a permitting perspective for construction, a lot of times if we're removing material from the site, wherever that goes to also has to have approved permit. So, maybe in the vicinity of the pond, you could do something, but if you were to try to send it to another home in the community, they may actually have to have a permit to accept that.
Okay.
So that complicates that as well.
So to follow up on that, say these homeowners did something on their own. Does the slope of their backyard affect the design of this pond? So if they decided to try it, because I know some of them are pretty steep, if someone decided to build some level of like some retaining wall and kind of bring their yard maybe more to a flat situation rather than just kind of falling off the edge, is that going to affect the design of this pond or basin?
Typically any design on the adjacent properties would probably have to account for where the water on that property is going. So right now, if it's just going over the ground surface to the pond, if it's one of the properties to the north or the south, usually, so any of that water, they would have to manage in a way that it's not going to erode the banks of the pond, or create some sort of condition where it's exacerbating the maintenance. So I guess it's a complicated question because it really depends on what they're doing, how much of an impact it is, if it's a major project or a small project. But usually if you're not changing the manner in which the water is getting there, there's no real concern. So
Got it.
That's a simple response.
Several of those backyards really do literally kind of fall right into the basin. There's really no backyard. It's just kind of very steep hills. So, okay, great. Thank you.
I would just like to add that, or encourage anyone planning to do any landscaping in their backyards, especially around the project area, rain gardens, the rain barrels, stormwater capture, things like that, best management practices. Look into that. That would be a good thing to look into.
Great.
And rain gardens would be a great way to accent what's going on in the basin itself with the same plants and everything else. So.
Okay.
Now, I would just like to mention that there is an easement on that north side. So if any of those homeowners are planning anything, just make sure that they're aware that that easement is there.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I could share that real quick, Jay, so everyone understands. Along the north side of the pond, there's existing maintenance easement.
So 20 feet, that's what it says, 20 feet off the fence?
It's essentially 20, it's a little odd. It's not quite 20 feet off the fence. It varies, and it comes out at an angle from that property line, so it's
Okay.
not exactly uniform.
Mhm.
The way the surveyors drew it in this case. So that may be the route for access to the top of the berm for construction as well. So that's something that
Okay.
we'll elaborate on as we finalize the drawings.
Yeah, we definitely, so the one family definitely is one of them with the small children. So we definitely want to, you know, make sure that we keep that as safe as possible, which I know, you know, that is in the process and in the project. But I know that was, I know one of the concerns is that one backyard is in the easement. So, and they definitely have the little ones. So little ones that like to run. So.
Yeah, so basically, if there's any property owners on that side of the fence that want to do any kind of regrading, unfortunately, they're not going to be able to do it.
Okay.
Because it has to be properly graded, and we need to be able to get in there and do any kind of work if anything should fail.
Great. But theoretically, I mean, I don't know distance wise or anything in their yards. And this is just, I mean, because they just texted me a question and just was asking if they are with it past the 20 feet and they wanted to do some kind of, you know, landscaping, that would be acceptable. But within the 20 feet of the easement, they really can't really do anything.
Yeah, I don't see why it would be a problem. Basically, pretty much all the water going to this basin comes from
It's coming from the
base.
different inlets. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Would you mind
Great.
showing I'm just curious now, the easement on the other side of the basin?
There is a smaller easements, not really meant for access, but part of the original design. So there's a slope in the southwest corner where the emergency spillway for the basin is. So that's listed as a public
So
access easement.
that's my yard. I'm just curious if that dash line represents our fence that's there or the fence that's currently there. Anyone know that for?
Yeah, so the fence line is this line here you see with the X's.
Oh.
So it actually goes a little bit beyond.
Oh, so you guys can access beyond our fence.
Yeah, technically, but I wouldn't see for what reason we would need to take equipment that way. It's fairly steep and it doesn't extend all the way to the road.
Yeah, that would only be really if that would fail and we would need to completely regrade that area. I never would see us ever tearing your fence out other than if that would happen.
Okay, we have a boat parked down there, and if it needs to be moved, I'm happy to make that happen.
No, I think you're fine.
There is also one in the southeast corner here, but it's really for the maintenance of that pipe. So if the pipe would need to be replaced or repaired, that's where that would go. But those are the two on the south side.
So can I ask one more quick question? There's a natural spring, and it looks like we have two areas coming into this basin from Silo Hill. So that spring has been taken into account, and that will naturally flow into that basin and go through the water system correctly.
That is correct. So we're not changing the bottom elevation of the basin significantly. And ultimately, what's retaining water here is really the embankment on the west side. So when that was originally constructed, there's actually a clay core and cutoff channel in that embankment. So it's intended to prevent water from seeping through the embankment. So the springs that are currently exposed and flowing in the basin still will, and they're not going to be impacted to a degree that they're going to disappear. So the water table in this area is going to remain where it is. We were very careful in this case. The design water elevation of the micro pool itself is still at the same elevation of the current bottom. So where you have water now that might pool on the surface would be the same elevation as that micro pool. It's just going to be collected in one specific area.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions while we have everybody here? Hearing none. Again, I'm the town planner and I am in charge of this project. So if there's any problems whatsoever, if there are any questions during construction, if there's any issues, please contact me immediately and we'll make sure it's resolved. Jen and I have a really good contact system. So if you just want to contact Jen or contact me directly, it's totally up to you, but we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And I will get answers for your maintenance questions. I do have to talk with the mayor once Leslie, do you have another question?
I'm sorry, we had one more question from the group, and we may have missed it. When is this slated to begin?
Did you say next spring, David?
Yeah, Jay, you may want to speak on that too, but yeah, I believe that's the tentative plan at this point.
Yeah, if everything goes smoothly, hopefully next spring.
But it's, in this case, it's tied to the grant application cycle. So whenever they announce grant awards, which we expect to receive one since we've gotten one for the design,
Yeah,
that would kind of dictate when the starting.
yeah. So we received a $34,000 grant with the help of our contractor here. We applied for a Chesapeake Bay Trust grant, and we're also applying for a couple other grants for construction. So that's what's holding up the process. We're applying for grants, trying to get some money so we don't have to spend taxpayer dollars. So, but we're hoping to get it done next year, hopefully.
Okay, so the NOGAs come in spring of 21.
22.
22.
22. Yep.
22. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Thank you, everybody. Like I said, email me, call me if you have any questions.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
All right. Absolutely.
Yep. Zach, if you don't have the posters that Kevin presented, I will forward them along so you can post them somewhere for the community to review in a little more detail.
Cool. Yep. We can put something on our webpage.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.